In the previous class, we started looking at some models of academic writing, and we looked at statement of purpose and also research statement very briefly. Continuing our discussion, we will look at another important aspect of academic life, that is research proposal. So, before we go to discuss research proposal, we will very briefly look at teaching statement. So, this is just like research statement is a necessary requirement for many academic positions. So, what is it? Let us look at it. So, a teaching statement includes your philosophy of teaching and learning, a description of how you teach. So, it means your teaching methodology. General, you may follow slightly different techniques to teach different subjects, but what the idea here is some general principles. Then justification for your methodology. The statement can actually demonstrate that you have been very reflective and purposeful about your teaching. So, when you go to teach something, you thought about it, you thought about the methodology. Then communicate your goals as an instructor and your corresponding actions in the classroom. So, what do you think as your goals as an instructor, and what do you do in order to achieve those goals? Let us look at a sample teaching statement. So, you can see that here is a sample teaching statement. Let us read it. My training at the Annenberg School for Communication at the University of Pennsylvania provided excellent opportunities for me to develop my teaching philosophy. I functioned as teaching assistant for several undergraduate courses at the Annenberg School, including Communication and Persuasion, instructed by Dr. Joseph Capella, Children and Media, instructed by Dr. Amy Jordan, and Communication and Behavior, instructed by Bruce Hardy. I also had the opportunity to teach Communication and Behavior at the Annenberg School. I am strongly committed to excellence in teaching, as evidenced by my students' qualitative and quantitative evaluations of my performance in the classroom and by their nomination of me for the James D. Woods Teaching Award, an award which I was honored to receive. So, as you can see in the very first paragraph, the candidate here talks about his or her experience as teaching assistant for several undergraduate courses. So, then there is also reference to student evaluations and an award the candidate has received. Continuing, I have the good fortune to have had extraordinary teachers throughout my education. I try to take what is exceptional about each of my mentors and apply it in my own classroom. The characteristics that impacted me most are those that I work hardest to replicate in my own classroom. Enthusiasm for the material and strong critical thinking skills. I demonstrate and cultivate these characteristics by exhibiting a sincere interest in students' individual development, understanding their goals, unique situation and capabilities, and by holding high academic standards. So, here the candidate briefly talks about his or her teaching philosophy, the qualities which the candidate attempts to focus on: enthusiasm for the material and strong critical thinking skills. And where have these come from? These have come from the candidate's mentors. I try to cultivate an enthusiasm for the study of communication by illustrating my own enthusiasm for the material. I love what I do, and I let that show in the classroom through the charismatic presentation of course material. In addition, I believe that an enthusiastic interest in the field starts with the sense that one has a contribution to make. I strongly encourage students to respectfully share their thoughts and questions in the classroom. So, you can see here some techniques used by the candidate in the classroom. There is a description. To facilitate that exchange, I foster an environment where mutual respect is the norm. For my part, respect is communicated through my genuine interest in each student. I insist on knowing my students' names to show that I really do care what they have to say, and that I see each of them as an individual with individual needs, goals and contributions to make both inside and outside of the classroom. So, there is a statement here, and this is not just a vague general statement, it is substantiated with the help of a concrete action, that is trying to know students' names individually. I also believe that students will be excited by what is most relevant to them. In order to know what is relevant, I must know something about my students. I encourage face-to-face meetings at least twice during the semester. I also arrive early to class so that students have the opportunity to converse with me about who they are, where they are from, what they see in their future, what their interests are. I try to incorporate what I know about my students into lecture and discussion, primarily through examples. With reference to papers, I try to let the students sit in the driver's seat. I offer constructive criticism where necessary, while allowing the students to pursue what interests them. This way, I can push my students beyond what they are capable of accomplishing alone, while maintaining an investment in the subject matter. I also use the time before and after class to elicit feedback from students regarding what is and is not working for them in the classroom. I try to use that feedback to make adjustments accordingly. So, here in the previous paragraph, the writer says I try to know individual needs and goals. So, that is elaborated upon. So, the candidate says I come early, I talk to students about even their future, their interests. So, something outside the course material. I also want my students to learn how to think critically. That is, I want them to be able to make informed decisions about the merits of arguments that are presented and generate thoughtful feedback regarding the strengths and weaknesses of arguments, as well as the theories, methods and evidence that are employed to support them. Therefore, I provide students with questions to think about while consuming a piece of literature, so that the reading can be motivated and directed. These questions include: what is the main claim in a particular study? What evidence is used to support that claim? Does the evidence that is offered indeed support the claim? Why or how? What other kinds of evidence could be used to support this claim? What are the implications of these findings? These guiding questions also provide students with an opportunity to have focused, in-depth discussion. I understand that learning occurs when new information is integrated into existing knowledge structures and students vary in their baseline knowledge. Therefore, I offer a variety of learning tools for students, such as a list of further readings that are not required, but offer different perspectives. I also try to connect new ideas that are presented with content from previous lectures. So, if you recall earlier, the candidate mentions that two skills are very important, enthusiasm for the material. So, that is elaborated here, personal interest and interaction with the individual students. Second is strong critical thinking skills. So, these are elaborated here. So, in this paragraph, so the candidate says I give material to students and give them some thinking questions, and some examples are also here included. I have high expectations in terms of academic standards. I help students meet those standards by encouraging and congratulating students when they understand the material and subsequently raising the level of discourse. In order to minimize the extent to which my high expectations work against my desire to cultivate an enthusiasm for the study of communication, I make my expectations clear from the first day of class. In addition, I am eager to provide extensive feedback on written assignments, and I am available to meet for guidance. Although writing lengthy feedback on assignments is time consuming, I believe it is one of the most important pieces of feedback that we can provide students, because it is tailored to the students' own interests and abilities. Consequently, it is an excellent opportunity to explain concepts in a way that makes sense to the student. Finally, I account for progress that has been made. It is true that all students enter the classroom with different kinds of preparation and background knowledge. Assessment of the student's performance should take that into consideration. Students' progress should be recognized, and I make an explicit attempt to do so. So, here again candidate gave some more concrete examples about how she has high expectations in terms of academic standards, and how goals are set in the very first class itself, how the candidate gives feedback. So, overall, as you might have observed in this sample, the candidate clearly talks about philosophy of teaching and clear examples of techniques and methods followed by the candidate in the classroom. So, this kind of a teaching statement creates a good impression about you. Now, we move to the next important thing, that is research proposal. So, what is a research proposal? So, this is a proposal in the form of a request for supporting your research or extension project, something of that sort. So, you usually write a research proposal to your university, institute or some other funding agency asking them to support your research. So, what are the things you include under a research proposal, and what makes a research proposal an effective one? So, let us look at its components and its characteristics. Experts say that good proposals need to answer the following questions: what you want to do, how you want to do, how much it will cost, and how much time it will take. So, clear statements about your research problem and your methodology. Then you are asking for funds, so details about budget, and of course, timeline. You cannot say that I will go on doing my research, you need to have a timeline, and so you say that by 1 month I finish this, by 2 months I complete it, you present a detailed timeline. Then, how the proposed project relates to the sponsor's interests. So, basically the question is why they should fund you. So, say you are writing to an agency which funds projects related to information technology, then you should clearly specify how your project is something very important in the field of information technology, and how it is related to the interests, the goals of the funding agency. Then, what difference the project is going to make? So, you have to very clearly argue that your project has long term implications. So, recall, if an external funding agency is investing their resources in the project, it is expected that your project will have long term benefits. Then, why you rather someone else should be funded to do this project? So, here you highlight your achievements as a researcher, you show that you are a credible person, you have necessary skills, and therefore, you will be able to complete the project successfully. Of course, these questions will be answered in different ways according to the nature of the proposed project, the agency you are writing to, and so on. Many times these agencies have their own specified format. So, you have to follow the format prescribed in such cases. For example, Government of India Department of Science and Technology DST funds projects under various schemes, and they have the format prescribed. So, you have to go to their website, download it and fill in details asked by them. Before you write your research proposal, some people say you need to first have something called idea sheet. So, this is like you can say a rough draft. You ask yourself some questions, and first you need to be clear about your research. So, this idea sheet will help you in preparing a good research proposal. So, some people say you can follow 5 steps to arrive at a clear conception of your research. So, let us look at them. Step 1, explain your topic so that others can understand what you want to study. So, first you be very clear about your topic and think of ways how you will explain it to others. Note here, your writing should be comprehensible to others. They should be able to read and understand what you are trying to say. Then, detail the personal reasons why you are interested in the topic. So, you ask yourself why you want to do it. So, only if you are convinced, only if you think you are most suitable candidate, then you can go ahead about this. So, you think of strong reasons why you are interested in this topic. Step 3, identify what is at issue, what is open to dispute for you. So, what do you think needs to be researched? So, only when there is a gap, only when there is a dispute, then that is point for beginning of your research. If conclusions have been reached, then there is no point in doing a research there. So, you have research venues when there is a gap. Step 4, describe for whom this issue might be significant or important. So, recall we said that you have to talk about implications of your project. So, you need to think, okay, who is going to benefit from this. So, if it is say a project in development of a particular software. So, this software, is it aimed at a specific group of industries, say banking sector or something, or is it going to help general public, say something like it is an operating system. So, you need to think about who is going to benefit from it. Then step 5, formulate an issue based question. So, here you clearly formulate your research question. So, how is this going to work? I want to investigate how this say teaching method is effective regarding schools located in rural areas. So, these kinds of specific questions you formulate. Typically, a research proposal has 4 sections. So, one is introduction, it is also called purpose, then review of relevant research, then methodology, and then implications. Now, we will look at each of these sections in detail. As I mentioned, most agencies clearly specify the format and you need to follow, but the sections we mentioned are most general and they also help us in other contexts, say like you are writing a research paper, your doctoral dissertation, So, we will look at these sections in detail. First one is introduction or purpose. So, what does this section do? Here the main idea here is this section describes the purpose of your study. It says why your study is relevant and timely. So, here you very briefly summarize previous approaches to the topic and state how your study is placed in this context. Say, is it filling a gap, or is it correcting a misconception? Is it building upon and extending on previous research, or you are testing a particular hypothesis? So, note here you are going to look at previous studies in detail in the other section, that is review of research, but here you, as I mentioned, you do it very briefly, how your proposed study is linked with the previous studies, how it builds on them. Then you state your research question. Here again very briefly, details you will include under methodology, and then you also say why you are interested in this, why it is important, and what is at stake, that is implications of the study. These things again you will discuss later on in detail, but in this section you include them in a very brief fashion. So, in a way you can say introduction is a kind of abstract. It includes details from all other sections. You state what you are going to do, you very briefly link it with previous studies, you also briefly mention how you are going to do it and what the implications will be. The next section is review of research. So, as the name says, here you look at some important previous studies, you review them, you sum up the findings, you paraphrase previous studies. The question is, why do we need to do it? Note here, this is also required when you are writing a research paper or a doctoral dissertation. So, you may be wondering, okay, I am going to do something new. So, why should I talk about previous studies? Actually, this is an important part. It serves many purposes. First thing, it clearly shows you that you have read important studies, at least important studies in your area of interest, and you have a good grasp of it. So, unless you have read about it, you have knowledge, how are you going to do research in that? So, you need to demonstrate that you have a good grasp of things going on in your area of interest. Second, you are going to place your study in relation to the previous studies. So, if you are simply going to do something which has already been done, then what is the relevance of your study? You need to clearly show that after a review that there is some gap and your study is going to address that gap, or one particular set of theory has been developed, a particular definition has been used in previous studies, you are not happy with that, you are offering something new. So, that is how you place your study in relation to previous studies. And note here, this is actually expected of you, that the important theories, important studies, current trends. So, these are important. Say in your research study, you say you are going to say develop an app for railway timetable, but something has already been developed and you are not aware of it, then your research does not become original and it does not contribute to the field. So, it is expected that you are aware of the latest trends, things happening in your area. Then, so as I said, you establish originality of your research, how your research is going to be a contribution to the field by reviewing and identifying a gap, or if you are replicating something which has already been done, you again need to specify what new things you are adding, what new dimensions are you bringing in, what new variables are you introducing. So, there again you need to clearly look at what has been done previously, and now you look at things in a different perspective. For example, if previous studies have looked at motivation levels of children from families where both father and mother are educated, you have to now say that, okay, see, I am going to look at motivation levels of children who are from families where parents are not educated. So, you are looking at children who are first generation learners. So, that is how your study is something new. Say a study has been done in English as a foreign language context. You are going to replicate the same thing in a context which is English is studied as a second language. So, there is a distinction. So, these kinds of things you highlight when you are reviewing the research. Experts usually say you can use review of research to accomplish the following things. One, you define or redefine a key term that is central to your study. So, say for example, motivation. Previous studies, say in the last 5 years, have adopted one particular perspective. Say they say this is motivation is interest to do something. So, you are offering something new, you are going to look at it in a different context. So, that you can do. Then discuss the history relevant to your research. So, your area, so when it has started, and then you discuss important studies over the last 5-10 years, say. Explain the strengths and limitations of different methodological approaches. So, different methods have been adopted by previous studies. So, you look at them, say qualitative methods, quantitative methods and so on. Say in order to study preferences of mobile phone users, say previous studies have largely used surveys. So, you say that okay, survey has its own advantages, but it has its own disadvantages. So, along with survey, I am also going to use personal interviews. I will go and talk to people personally to get details of their preferences. So, that is how you throw light on previous methods. Then you analyze different theoretical approaches. Say when you are talking about how children learn language, Chomsky's theories, universal grammar, these theories have been very popular and many people have been studying how children learn language in that framework. So, now you review it and you say that okay, this has many issues, I am going to look at acquisition from a different perspective. So, you can also evaluate theoretical frameworks. Then you identify trends in recent studies. So, say last 5 years, what has been the hot topic? What has been the topic of study? in the previous studies. In this fast changing world, particularly in science and technology, so these trends keep changing. Say earlier there were mobile phones with keypads. Now that's gone. Now it's all touch screen technology. So the trends keep changing, but if you still stick to something which is outdated, then your research is not relevant. So you should be aware of recent trends. Then point to more comprehensive reviews of research that others have written. There are these papers called state of the art reviews. These papers review prominent research, say in the last 20-30 years, and write extensive review. So, you may not be able to access all the articles, you yourself may not be able to write such an extensive review, mainly for time, space constraints. In such a case, you can simply refer to some research which has done such an extensive review. So, you say you review 5 studies in how you teach prepositions to students, and then you say okay, refer to so and so study for more comprehensive review. So, that thing also you can do when you are actually reviewing previous research. The next section is research methodology. So, what are the things you include here? Here you include the following things: hypotheses. These are very specific things. Okay. So, for example, if I teach by teaching students using this method, their scores on reading comprehension test will increase after 2 months. So, this is clearly stated in observable terms, that is hypothesis. Sometimes you might just want to have a broad research question like how is this teaching method going to influence reading comprehension levels of students. So, research question is something broad, whereas hypothesis is very specific and is stated in observable terms. Then what are the tools you are going to use? So, are you going to use some specific equipment? Are you going to use questionnaire? Are you going to design tests? Are you going to use standardized tools which are already available? So, what exactly are you going to use for collecting data? Then process of data collection. So, how are you going to use the tools you have stated and collect data? So, you will also state where you will be collecting your data from. So, like who your participants will be. So, say are you going to go to a school, you are going to teach, or are you just going to observe students for 1 month, 2 months? Are you going to send out a questionnaire to whom? So, how are you going to send this questionnaire? Is it going to be in print form or an online form, or are you going to use social media? So, how exactly you are going to collect data. So, the details are included. Next thing is data analysis tools. So, you do not have data with you at this stage, but still it is expected that you have thought about how you are going to analyze the data. So, it means you are also here clear about the nature of data. Say you are going to conduct a test, you will get quantitative scores. So, you would need some statistical tests, some software to run some tests. So, that will be one kind of analysis. If you are going to observe people, make notes, then that will be more of qualitative data. So, then how are you going to interpret it? So, there are frameworks to apply it. Say you are looking at a textbook. you are analyzing images used. So, how are you going to analyze them? Are you going to follow a framework, a rating scale? So, what exactly? So, those details you have to include, and then justify your research methodology. So, why you have chosen a specific tool and why a specific method of analysis. So, here you will link these things with previous research. So, previous studies have used this tool to study this particular purpose. Therefore, I am also going to use similar tools, or you say the previous studies used this tool, that was not effective because of these reasons. So, I am changing, I am modifying it and I am using these tools. So, your justification is linked to your hypothesis, your research question, and also what you have gathered from an extensive review of previous studies. So, you use previous studies to justify your research methodology. Next section is implications. So, here you include what you expect to find out at the end of your study and how these findings are important for stakeholders involved. So, it means, so of course, you cannot be very sure about findings, but you have some general expectations about outcomes. So, say you are using a new teaching methodology, you expect that there will be improvement in students proficiency level. So, that is you are going to say as the expected outcome of your research, and then you also state so how these findings are important. So, first to the funding agency, how is it going to be beneficial, and then to you can also say to society as general. So, that is what we call stakeholders, all the people who are involved in it. Now, let us look at a sample research proposal. This research proposal is titled, as you can see, Proposal for Research, the Affordances of Multimodal, Creative and Academic Writing. This is taken from the book Green and Lidinsky 2016. So, let us look at the proposal in detail. Researchers Hughes 2009, Vasudevan, Schultz and Bateman 2010 have called attention to the unique ways that writing can foster student learning and has for some time now argued that teachers in elementary and high schools should give students more opportunities to write fiction and poetry using image, music and text to express themselves. So, this is the claim. Elementary and high school students should be given an opportunity by teachers to write fiction and poetry using multimodal things, image, music and text to express themselves. So, this is not the person who is submitting this proposal, that person's claim. This is what some previous researchers have argued for. So, this is introduction to the field. Within the last decade, even more alternative modes of writing have gained prominence. Researchers Hughes 2009, Hull and Katz 2006 argue that multimodal digital storytelling provides students with ways to help them engage more deeply with their written work. So, this is building on what has been previously said, using multi-modals to express creativity. Digital storytelling in particular enables students to examine their experiences by writing personal narratives in which they confront key turning points in their lives and the challenges they face. So, from multimodal creative expression, writer is narrowing down further. This is called digital storytelling. So, what do students do here? They examine their personal experiences by writing personal narratives in which they confront key turning points in their lives and challenges they face. So, about their personal lives and experiences. In turn, they can use images, music and voiceover to amplify and give meaning to their written stories. So, when they write, say they just do not use words, letters, sentences, they also use images, music and voiceover. Allowing for what researchers call new literate spaces creates the opportunity for multiple modes of learning, understanding and collaboration that challenge the limited ways that students use writing as a mode of learning in school. Hughes 2009, Hull and Katz 2006. So, this is another important feature. So, you cite previous studies. We will look at citation and reference styles later on. Students may learn to write persuasive essays, but they also need opportunities to learn about themselves and use their writing as a way to create changes in their lives. Thus, researchers urge educators to reform curricular and pedagogical practices to help students use writing to help them develop a sense of identity and ownership of their writing, to see the decision making power they have as individuals. So, here the proposer sums up the main findings of previous studies. So, the benefits of using multimodal things. So, it will help develop a sense of identity, ownership. It will also help them see their decision making power. When they argue that multimodal digital literacy practices have a place in the standard curriculum, researchers Hall 2011, Hughes 2009, Hull and Katz 2006, Ranke 2007, Vasudevan et al. 2010. So, you can see extensive list of studies provide evidence to show how youth grow and develop, become more confident learners and use what they learn in and out of school. So, this is elaboration of this, the benefits of using it. This is particularly true when youth have opportunities to reflect on their lives and use multiple literacies to give meaning to their experience. They can use image, music and text to confront how things in their lives look and feel, to examine the decisions they have made and to consider the decisions they might make in confronting hardship, discrimination and loss. However, most research fails to provide a satisfactory or compelling rationale for why new literacy should be used in the classroom. So, this is all about what previous studies have found. Now, you can see the proposer is identifying a gap. So, according to the proposer, most of previous research studies, they fail to provide a satisfactory or compelling rationale for why new literacy should be used in the classroom. Then some studies are cited here, or how the seemingly unique gains could be positively integrated into the standard curriculum. So, this is another gap in the studies. The lack of assessment focusing on how academic and new literacies affect one another reveals a flaw in the conclusions drawn from studies that neglect the realities of teaching in K-12 schools. Increased emphasis on standards, testing and accountability seem to preclude the kind of focus that new literacies seem to require. Thus, if educators are to allow for new literate spaces, they need to know how to do so within the standard curriculum. So, writer here has identified a gap. So, how you integrate it into the standard curriculum, that has been elaborated here. So, there is focus on standards, testing and accountability. So, therefore, there is a problem. So, teachers, educators, they need to know how to integrate new literacies into standard school curriculum. Specifically, few researchers explore students' sense of their literate identity in academic and creative writing, or how context matters in how students feel about themselves and their writing. While most researchers, Binder and Kostopoulos 2011, you can also see there are more studies cited. So, refer to what they call the monoliteracy landscape of schools, the limits of literate experience to print. None really compare the opportunities that academic writing gives students versus say creative writing before, during and after the study. So, here the writer is bringing another point, comparing academic writing versus creative writing. That is, focusing only on the value of digital storytelling, for example, or creative writing is not sufficient to effect reform in school. Are there really significant differences between different kinds of writing? What are these differences? Such a gap in research seems to necessitate an inquiry into a student's emergent sense of authorship in different forms of composing, even academic writing in and out of school. So, writer here adds another dimension. So far it has been about creative writing, I am going to look at academic writing as well. Therefore, I propose a study that I will provide an analysis of both academic and creative writing in an after school program that helps children develop as learners through tutoring and enrichment. So, this is clearly the research proposed, the purpose of this study, the research question you can also say. So, an analysis of both academic and creative writing in an after school program that helps children develop as learners through tutoring and enrichment. So, this is the research question. One implication of my research would be to show why educators might expand the types of literate experiences that students have in school. So, the writer here is talking about the implications of the study, proposed study. In order to investigate the possible differences between multimodal, creative and standardized academic writing, this proposed study aims to explore a. the unique opportunities afforded by the multiple means of expression inherent in digital storytelling, b. how and if these opportunities create an alternative space for the growth of empowered literate identities and a sense of agency, c. the extent to which writing supports a student's development of an authorial voice, and d. why schools should be concerned with the affordances given to the development of a student's written voice and individual identity by including multimodal digital storytelling in the curriculum. So, the purpose of the research has been briefly stated here, we saw here. Now, the proposer gives more details. So, the proposed study aims to explore, then there are 4 clear points. The study focuses on analyzing the student's sense of authorship in both their academic and creative assignments. To what extent can standard academic and creative multimodal expression help students develop an authorial identity and the skills they need to flourish in and out of school? Considering the current atmosphere of accountability and federal testing, Hull and Katz 2006, it is important to ask what role multimodal composing can play in the standard and narrow curriculum. So, this is about introduction. There is also very brief review of studies here, and the writer has identified the gap, has stated the purpose of the study, then detailed research questions are mentioned here. Now, the writer talks about methodology. To address the aims of my study, I will conduct interviews and focus groups to examine students' attitudes about writing in and out of school at the Crusoe Community Learning Center CCLC in a small Midwestern city. Interviews and focus groups will enable me to discover student attitudes and feelings about writing across the in-school and out-of-school context in order to develop some insight into how writing can enable or disengage students. I will also take field notes taken by a participant observer in the after-school creative writing workshop to develop a picture of the after-school classroom dynamics. So, writer here says the tools will be interviews and focus groups. Then there will also be after school writing workshop, and a participant observer will take notes, and those notes will be examined by the researcher. So, this talks about the tools going to be used, also the location where the study is going to be conducted is mentioned. This is a Crusoe Community Learning Center in a small Midwestern city. Context. So, now more details about CCLC. The CCLC is an off-campus educational initiative of a nearby private university in partnership with the surrounding neighborhood residents. Serving around 600 participants in the regular programming, the CCLC also partners with the community schools in the surrounding area with program outreach connecting to nearly 8,000 additional youths throughout the year. Located in a high traffic, low income neighborhood, the CCLC's mission centers around promoting hospitality, education, partnership, civic engagement and sustainability in the surrounding area and all the participants. So, as you can see, the CCLC is a special arrangement. So, the proposer here gives more details about it. So, this is not a regular school classroom, this is some special arrangement made by private university in partnership with some surrounding neighborhood residents. So, there are more details about it. Organized around operating as a learning center and gathering space, the CCLC fosters relationships with the students, the surrounding residents and the city's universities in a safe, collaborative atmosphere. Classes and programming range from English as a new language ENL. So, this is another feature you can observe. So, you have used a term, then you introduce its abbreviation. Later on you use only the abbreviation. So, that you may have already noticed here. So, this CCLC, so the full form is written here for the first time. Along with that, the abbreviation is also introduced. So, now readers know when you say CCLC, it refers to this thing. English as a new language ENL to financial literacy, entrepreneurship, basic computing and one-on-one tutoring for area children conducted by college volunteers. The creative writing class and the CCLC's curricular environment will provide an appropriate population and unique space to explore the possible affordances between creative and academic writing. So, here now the writer is justifying the choice. So, why CCLC? So, here is the justification. With the after school programming divided in weekly day by day activities centered on enrichment, academic tutoring and creative writing, the CCLC's after school context is inherently connected to the student's school context. Thus, the CCLC's efforts to help students with their day to day school work and also offer enrichment unique to an after school program can enrich my understanding of the way students' context in school and after school influence how they see themselves as writers. So, clear justification about the choice. So, this is what you need to do. So, if you choose say Urban population, you have to say very specifically why. Rural, then why. Then again cross sections, say upper middle class, lower income group. So, you have to give justification for the choice. Now, the writer gives more details about participants. Participants at the CCLC, I will focus on Ms. Smith's class. Ms. Smith is a former 4th grade teacher serving the center as a full-time AmeriCorps member. As an AmeriCorps member, Ms. Smith works in a federal program funded by the state of Indiana for a full-time 40-hour week at the CCLC. Taking place every Wednesday, the creative writing class centers around brainstorming, drafting and publishing the student work for display inside the center and on a developing web blog. I have chosen this specific class and student population because it offered the opportunity to talk to students about the school and after school writing experiences alongside the physical creative artifacts they created in Ms. Smith's class. Due to the participants' weekly experience of academic tutoring and creative class time, the choice was based on the wide range of writing activities that could be probed by the broad experience based focus of the question script. So, here are details about participants. So, the writer says is going to focus on a person, Ms. Smith's class, then there are details about that person. Now, data collection procedure and analysis. I will conduct focus groups and interviews with the students in Ms. Smith's class over the course of 3 weeks. To obtain parental consent in order to conduct the focus groups and subsequent interviews, I will email consent forms requesting each student's participation in my research. I will do so 2 weeks prior to the study start in order to provide the necessary time for the forms to be sent home and signed by the parents. For the complete list of questions, see Appendix A. So, you can see here the writer includes the tools used in appendices. Upon receiving confirmation from Ms. Smith that the consent forms had been completed, I can then conduct focus groups and interviews with the participating students. So, this is about preparation, and then I will audio record the focus groups and interviews. Following the end of each session, I will transcribe the recordings. Though I will not take notes during the focus groups and interviews in order to maintain total engagement with the participants, I will type a series of reflections and field notes after the completion of each audio recorded session. Following the completion of the transcriptions, I will also take more notes to identify the themes that emerge in both interviews with individual children and in the focus groups. So, about transcription procedures and what will happen during these sessions. After analyzing student responses, I will construct several categories to explore the CCLC participant sense of self and authorial identity across contexts, safe spaces, expressing interest and meaningful message and ownership. Now, implications. Though many and unique compelling findings support a pedagogical shift toward new literacies, researchers Vasudevan et al. 2010 tend to ignore the impact of a student's outside knowledge, experience and context for writing. Moreover, without clearly understanding the differences and similarities between academic writing and multimodal writing, educators may not see the importance of including alternative modes of literacy in the standard curriculum. So, you can see the writer here goes back to previous studies. So, again highlights what has not been looked at. So, thereby highlighting the contributions of the current study. So, I will skip over the remaining part of this, and the next section and the final section you see is working bibliography. So, include all the studies you have referred to. So, here you can again see that there is a specific way of mentioning the works you have referred to. So, this we will see when we look at referencing styles. So, this is how you can plan your research proposal. You start with introduction, you do review of research, then your methodology, and then implications. Of course, you can have, you will include bibliography. Optional things would be appendices, like the tools you are going to include. These things will come under appendices. To sum up, so in this class we looked at one important aspect of academic life, that is preparing research proposals. So, we saw that you do previous studies to identify gap, to decide what you are going to do, and then you highlight your study in relation to those. So, if you are writing to a funding agency, you need to clearly say why they should fund you, how your study is going to be beneficial for them, and what are the long term implications. You also need to include information about budget and a timeline if you are submitting for a funding agency. If you are submitting it to your instructor as part of your course, then you may not worry about the budget. Thank you.